Well, that was a 9-iron there. Let's talk about irons and scoring. First thing you'd have to say is it's easier to score with an iron than a wood. Secondly, the shorter the iron, no question about it, that was a 9-iron. The shorter the iron you're coming in with there, the better your scoring opportunity. Obviously, number one, the shot's usually shorter. But secondly, the more loft you're hitting with, the less curve you'll get. So if you had a swing, let's say, that produced X amount of curve, that ball would curve more with a 5-iron than it would with a 9-iron. So your scoring opportunities rise when you have shorter clubs in there. That's why we've been talking about staying fairly aggressive off the tee. But another consideration, listen, I hit the ball about 250 on a decent drive. I mean, I can certainly get it longer than that if I'm downwind or whatnot, but I hit it about that, and I play tees at about 6,400 yards when I have the choice. That suits my game. Let me show you a little chart the PGA came up with to show people, relative to their driving distance, what kind of length golf courses they should be playing to give them decent shot values and decent scoring opportunities. So here's the driving distances down the left. Now, as I mentioned, I drive at about 250 on a decent drive, and I'm actually playing the golf course at about the length I should be for that length. Let's say a much more typical driving distance for many men and senior men golfers is 200 yards. I'm not saying there aren't people that hit it further than that, but that's not atypical. In fact, it's reasonable. Look how short the golf course should be played at. That's maybe second set of tees from the very front tees on a lot of golf courses. But if a person that drove at 200 played the course in this range of yardage, they would have a good time and hit some short irons in there and really be able to score. And of course, you drop down to some of these driving yardages that the senior golfers and ladies might be hitting. You're well down in yardage. For some people, they may even want to play in front of the tees and tee one up there. And again, even for 225, which is a decent hit for many players, that's the kind of yardage. Most people that hit it that far play the course a lot longer than that. So it's up to you, but you'll have more fun and do a lot more scoring and get better shot values into courses if you take this chart into mind. Okay, I've got myself a pretty difficult short-sided greenside pitch here. Not the shot, obviously, you want to come up with. Now, we looked at scatter patterns previously in the driving video. Of course, they come into play in iron videos as well. Now, typically, you're not going to have out of bounds up by a green, that kind of severity of penalty. But there's still things to consider, such as short-sidedness. Let's have a go at this shot. See if we can make some sort of a decent attempt. Well, not bad there, a little pull, but not a bad shot. There's still things you really have to consider with your scatter pattern and your choice of where to aim. Let's have a look at that. So here's a green complex. It's not a super wide green. There's some slope off here. There's some deep bunkers over there, or reasonably deep at any rate, but that is not going to stop me from going at pretty much at the pin anywhere. Listen, if the pin's over here and I have a reasonably long club in, a 5 or a 6 iron, sure, I might be aiming my shot a little bit more over here. Mostly not because I'm necessarily scared of a bunker shot, but I say I want to hit the green, but mostly just because I'm less accurate and cannot stop the ball as quickly there. And this brings into mind, the chart we showed you a little earlier in this video. If you play golf courses that are significantly too long for you, you are not going to get a wedge 9, 8-iron type of shot in your hand that often. You will not have as much fun. The shorter the club you're coming with, the more you can spin it, the more accurate you are. So round numbers, that's a green light just about anywhere. Now that said, we still don't want what we call short side misses. So if the flag's there, this is not an easy bunker shot or not an easy chip. But here's a couple of other considerations. Go for it for the most part. If the flag's there and I've got a pitching wedge, I'm pretty much going for it. But let's say the flag's maybe at the back of the green, and let's say you're in between clubs. In that case, I'm going with the shorter club because I want my miss for a putt. I don't want to take the longer of the two clubs, not quite take enough off it and leave myself a short-sided shot. Now, if the pin is at the front of the green and I'm in between my clubs, I'm going with the longer club. Again, my typical shot pattern, that puts the middle of my spread a little more behind the green, so that in each case, I'm likely either putting this way or I'm putting that way. I'm more likely to hit the green. So in between clubs, definitely pick according to where the flag is. Now, let's have a look at a little scenario here. Here's one. Now, this would get me thinking a little bit. If the flag is over here, and again, typically you won't get out of bounds up by a green, but you'll frequently get water. Not only is the water relatively close to the flag, but invariably it's downslope to the water for obvious drainage reasons. The green's going to be built up above the water, so you don't have to miss it much. You miss that thing right around here somewhere, it's probably bouncing down into the water. So Unless I'm really having my confidence up and I have maybe a gap wedge, I'm going to start to hedge away from here. And if it's a long enough club, if it's a 5-iron, I'm probably playing somewhere for here so that most of my shots are not in the water over there. The penalty is just a little too severe to be that aggressive with the strategy. All right, as we're moving along here, even though this isn't strictly strategy, it's a big part of playing golf and playing well, and that's routine. I have a certain routine when I hit the ball. Let me just whack a 9-iron here again. There it was. Reasonably solid shot. But there's a lot to a routine that can really help you dial in shots. It can really help you under pressure. Let's go to the range for a few minutes and flesh out a couple of things, then we'll get back out here to the golf course. So there's several things that would be important about a pre-shot routine. No two are exactly alike. You'll have to decide what's right for you based on some of the things, hopefully, that I'll say. And we'll show you a little bit about how to build one and how to practice one. But first thing, it just gives you a certain familiarity. When you're under duress, you're on the first tee of a tournament or one hole to go or something in a match and it's a tight spot, you want to go with something that's familiar, takes your mind off what you're trying to do. And very importantly, time frame wise, when your routine is pretty consistent, the amount of time it takes you to get into the shot and to stand over the ball and go stays the same all the time, or very close to the same, because it's very easy to get overthinking and just kind of get stuck and fidgeting and wait too long. Never a good thing. Just as easily, really, when you're under pressure, is just to feel like I'm in a, some kind of a mental lather there and rush it a little bit too much. It helps you fit your time. You want to do this, by the way, to suit yourself. Now, I'm kind of a methodical, think about it sort of a person. It's just process person is my deal. So for me, once I've gotten myself set up, and we'll talk about alignment here in just a moment, I usually have a look, a waggle, a look, a waggle, a look, a waggle, 3 kind of little goes usually. It's not always exactly that, and that's kind of my routine, and then I'm pretty much ready to go. It sort of fits my personality. So fit something that will make up something that fits you. And finally, of course, as we look from this angle, finally at least, keeps you loose, keeps you in motion. About the only great player I can think of, there may have been others that really had, once he was set up, very little movement, was Seve. He'd kind of stand there and just look at the hole, not much with the club or the body. Pretty much everyone else I've thought of, would have movement. So Jack Nicklaus had kind of a corresponding waggle of his club with his feet. Other players are a little more jumpy with their feet or waggle a little bit. Something, though, that keeps them loose and keeps them in motion. It's very easy to get stuck over the ball, if you like. Let's have a look from here. So alignment, obviously a critical part of pre-shot routine. So that's my intended line, that white stick there. Here's a very, very important key, and I think pretty much every great player does this in one way or another. Line the club up first. In other words, gain a clear picture of your target line and your club's relationship to that. And once you've felt confident that your club is on line and that's etched in your mind, then and only then stand in front of the club. So I'm never really aiming myself. I'd be aimed a little bit left of the target anyway, as in parallel alignment, but always aim yourself at the club and target line, but aim the club first. I recommend stepping in with your trail foot, as that will give you a much clearer picture of the target. Once that lead foot and shoulder are up here and you're looking kind of side of your body there, it's more difficult to line up. So trail foot, get the club set there, then get yourself in position, then you go into that little settling in and getting yourself sort of routine. I do that at home in front of on the edge of a carpet or some grouting. It's a great way to get good at that, kind of get it to where it's automatic. Now, a couple of other quick comments here. The waggle you choose will influence your takeaway a little bit. Ben Hogan talked a lot about that. Now, my particular tendency is to get a little bit rigid and stiff, so I like a waggle where I have a little rotation, a little bounce of the hands. I feel the club head a little bit more. That works for me. You may have too much of this kind of thing in your takeaway, in which case don't be waggling like that. Waggle something a little straighter, or play around with something you feel like stimulates you to the right sort of takeaway patterns. Finally, an old friend of mine, used to work with him back in the Ledbetter days, won a PGA Tour event, named Bob Law. Oh, he played out there for 13, 14 years. Obviously a terrific player. He used to say that he liked to practice his routine, but he didn't practice it every shot because it just took too much time and didn't feel it was necessary. So when he would practice, he'd put together, forget the exact numbers, but say a batch of 10 balls, and then he'd have maybe 3 at the one side. Once he'd hit these 10, the next 3 would be full dress rehearsals behind the ball, different targets. It wouldn't take him that long, but he'd work through his routine, then back to not doing it. And he felt like as many times as he'd done it, just those little regular doses kept the Kept the routine nicely in the mix, but didn't slow down the practice session too long. Great tip for practice. Okay, let's touch on one more topic here, and that's when you're in between clubs. Happens frequently in a round of golf, but how often do you really practice it? You know, for most of us, we don't get a chance to hit balls as often as we'd like anyway, and after about 10 or 15 minutes, more often not, the blood's flowing, we've got more speed than we had at the beginning, we're enjoying hitting the ball further, it's kind of fun. Rarely do we drop back and try to hit an in-between shot. Now, we touched on when to use in-between clubs a little bit with different pin placements and short-sightedness, but typically what you're going to be doing is when you're in between clubs, you're going with the longer club and going to shorten it up a little bit. That's a lot easier usually than trying to force the short club. So here's a couple of thoughts for you. And by the way, a quick anecdote, an old friend of mine in the golf business's dad was great friends with Ray Floyd, so consequently my friend Joe had hung around Ray Floyd a fair bit over at his home club in Miami during his playing days, and one day Ray lasered off one of the pins on the range. They had perfect balls and whatnot, and he started hitting 3 different clubs to that pin, not just for direction but for distance. And Joe asked him about it, and he said, listen Joe, do you know how many shots in a round are in between clubs? People rarely practice it. It's important, that's why I'm practicing it. So that's what he was doing. Now, 3 things really at your disposal. Let's assume solid contact. Obviously the ball only responds to speed in terms of how far it goes, but shortening up on the club can reduce speed a little bit, makes the club shorter. It's an easy one, doesn't make a huge amount of difference in distance, but it's a good one. The next one, of course, would be shortening your backswing a little bit. If your backswing's shorter, you know, conventional wisdom says that you're probably not going to create as much speed. I tend to gravitate towards that a little bit because I've always had a propensity towards getting a little short in my backswing, so I find it, if you like, an easy adjustment. And for some people, it's just smoothing out their tempo, taking a little bit of steam out of there. So you can use any of those or a combination. We hit a 9-iron here. The 2 I like to use is a little bit of choke down, a little shorter backswing. Again, that just suits me, works well for me. So let's try it here. Find my routine. Yeah, that was a little shorter backswing. Didn't feel like great rhythm, but it was a decent shot. So practice those a little bit once in a while. They're very, very important shots. They'll help you dial those distances in. And hopefully the strategies in this video are going to help you become a more effective iron player.